Hi friends, my name is Nishantha. I am a dyslexic science teacher. I teach here in Southern California. If you're dyslexic, audiobooks are one of the best ways for you to become smarter. And in this video, I'm going to show you my audiobook workflow. So I've split this video up into 4 parts. In part 1, I'm going to tell you why audiobooks are so great. Part 2, I'm going to tell you some of the downsides of using audiobooks and how they're different from reading regular books. And in part 3, I'm going to give you my entire audiobook workflow. And in part 4, I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that I use to make the experience of using audiobooks a lot more easier for you. Why audiobooks are so great, especially if you're dyslexic. First of all, books are awesome, and audiobooks are even more awesomer than that. The reason why books are so great is because they allow you to make models of how the world works. So someone will spend, like 50, 60 years living, and maybe they're an expert in a certain field, and they take their best knowledge, they spend some time, they sit down and they figure out the best way to deliver their knowledge to you. And then you can kind of read a book, and like within hours you'll be able to have all of that distilled information as a model in your head. So whenever you come across something in the world, you can use that model to make better decisions on it. You can use that model to filter out information. You can use that model to figure out what to do next. So when you're reading something, there's 2 things that are simultaneously happening inside your head. The first thing is called decoding. So decoding is when your eyeballs read symbols on a page, and then those symbols on that page gets turned into words, and a sequence of those words gets turned into a sentence. And then the second part of the mechanics of reading is those sentences somehow have to be able to be understood by your brain. So when you're using an audiobook, what's happening is the first part of this mechanics of reading kind of gets automated. When someone's reading to you, then you no longer have to do the decoding part, and you can just focus on the comprehension part. Obviously, this has really big implications for dyslexics because we have issues with the decoding portion of reading, and that's the reason why we don't like to read, or we have a hard time reading, and why it's so energy consuming for us to read. If someone can automate that for us, if someone can read that for us, then obviously that is a really good thing, and that's what audiobooks do. There's a couple other reasons why audiobooks are so amazing. I'll just touch on those really quickly because I just want to, and they're fun to think about. So storytelling has been something that humans have been doing for thousands and thousands of years. It's our first form of entertainment. You have like this wise old dude or wise old lady. I haven't been there, but I can imagine, sitting around a campfire. You're burnt, like you got some meat cooking or something, and you have like these people telling stories to each other. And that was our first way of entertaining each other and like building bonds with each other. So this structure in our head, it's just there. It's like this evolutionary thing that makes us like a human. And the really cool thing about what's happening now is with audiobooks, you have the world's best storytellers writing these stories, and then you have the world's best narrators reading these stories. And when you combine them together, you get this really awesome experience that other humans, throughout the millennia or whatever, wouldn't get to experience. So when I was a kid, my mom would always take me to the local library. And when I was growing up, I lived in Las Vegas, and those libraries were really well funded from the casinos. So they had pretty much all the books that you would ever want. And it was a cool experience. I loved going to the library when I was a kid. One time, we went to the library, and my teacher or someone told me, hey, you should check out this book called the Harry Potter series. So I was like, all right, I'll check it out. But then when I went to get the book, it wasn't available. But the librarian was like, hey, we don't have that book, but check out this. We have this thing on CDs. So you can check out these CDs, and someone will read you these books. And I went home, and I put it on my computer, and it was the most amazing experience that I had with any kind of technology. Harry Potter, as you guys probably know, is one of the best children's books ever written, in my opinion. And the guy that was reading it was a guy named Jim Dale. And he is the best storyteller alive, as far as I'm concerned. I think he even won like a Guinness World Book of Records for having different voices for all the different characters in Harry Potter. I don't remember the number of characters that were in there, but it was massive. And for each individual character, he created a voice. And that whole experience was just such a good one that I instantly got hooked on audiobooks. At the time, there wasn't that many because you had to go to the library and get CDs, but as often as I could, I would try to get audiobooks. Next thing that's really, really awesome about audiobooks is your ability to multitask with them. So, with a regular book, it's like a single functioning thing. You have to sit there and read it, right? You can't do anything else with it. But with audiobooks, you can really do lots of other things. That don't require a huge cognitive demand. So if you're driving around, if you're walking around, if you're doing exercise, if you're doing house chores, things like that, then you have absolutely no time cost. You can listen to an audiobook while you're doing those other things, and it increases your enjoyment of those things. Whenever I have to do something for the house, or whenever I have to go on a drive, I always use an audiobook because it just makes that whole experience, that mundane thing, it just takes it up to the next level. A couple of years ago, when I was commuting 2 hours a day to get to work, it was some of my best times because I would just listen to audiobooks. And during my commute to work every day, I would read a lot, and I learned a lot during that time. So yeah, you can turn boring things into fun things using audiobooks. All right, so those are some of the advantages of audiobooks, but there are some disadvantages of using audiobooks as well. I'm gonna go over some of those disadvantages in this section, but don't get discouraged. In part 3 of this video, I'm gonna show you my workflow that I use with audiobooks, and that workflow is kind of designed to help me mitigate these disadvantages, and in some instances just completely get rid of them and just make your audiobook experience a lot better than if you were just reading a book. So the first downside of audiobooks is that it's impossible to skim things. So when you're reading a regular book, if there's parts that are boring, especially if it's like a nonfiction, you can kind of skim through it, right? Think of it kind of like a textbook. You're trying to find information. That's pretty hard to do with the audiobook because you don't know where to find that information. It's hard to scrub through audio right now. And I think that the technology will get there, but right now we don't have that technology. So it's really difficult to do that. So the second thing that kind of sucks about audiobooks is your experience with the book is sometimes really dependent on the reader. Sometimes you'll get readers that you don't really vibe with, or readers that are really boring, and it makes it really difficult to get through the material because the information, in between the information and your brain, is this reader that you don't really vibe with, so there'll be some friction between, you'll notice the reader more than the content, and you'll get really annoyed by it. I have some tricks to kind of work around that. When that happens, once every 20 books, I'll find a reader that I just can't deal with. So I'll just use some of these tricks to get through the content. The third thing that really sucks about audiobooks is the fact that you can't really make highlights or notes in your pages. And it's a huge part of the reading experience is the ability to do this. And in my workflow, I'll show you guys some strategies and techniques that I use to actually take notes inside audiobooks. Fourth thing that sucks about audiobooks is the fact that it's harder to pre-read. So when you're reading a book, especially a nonfiction book, you don't want to just open up the page and start reading it from cover to cover. That's the worst way to read. What you want to do is this thing called pre-reading. You want to flip through the pages, you want to look at certain chapters, you want to just skim the thing to kind of build a model of what the book is. So when you're reading it, it becomes easier to fill out the content and the information in there. But when you're reading an audiobook, the only thing you can do is to go from the first minute of the book to the last minute of the book, right? And that seems like the obvious thing to do, but in my workflow, I'm going to show you a way to kind of bring back this pre-reading model making thing inside your head while you're reading audiobooks, which makes it really easy to understand too. All right, guys, so let's just jump right into my audiobook workflow. In this section, I'm going to teach you everything that I do to read an audiobook. Sometimes I do all of these. Sometimes I just do a couple of these. Sometimes I just listen to the book, if it's depending on how much effort that I want to put into each book. So first of all, the app that I use to read audiobooks is Audible. I pretty much use Audible exclusively. I know there's a bunch of other apps. I've tried all of them pretty much, and I enjoy Audible the most. It does cost money to get books on Audible, but it costs money to get books using Amazon too. Physical books cost money too, and I find that Audible is cheaper than most physical books. For example, if you buy Audible credits in bulk, you can get a book for about $10, and that's a great deal for what you're going to be getting from an audiobook, because you're not only getting the writing, but you're also getting a pro reading it to you. So it's a great deal in my opinion. So that's the app I use, and I've split my workflow of reading an audiobook into 3 parts. The first part is called pre-reading. The second part is the listening, and the third part is post-reading. So in my pre-reading part, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to build a model of exactly what's happening in the book. especially if it's nonfiction, I try to get like a kind of like a table of contents, but like a more detailed table of contents inside my head before I go into the reading. And the way I do that is, first I read the table of contents, like it's available on Audible. You'll be able to do that. The second thing I do is I read the reviews. I try to get some opinions on what people have thought about this book. The third thing that I do is I try to go find this dude, whoever wrote the book. I try to find him talking. I try to like, it would be really good if he's talking about the book he's writing, but it doesn't really matter. I'm trying to like hear his voice. I'm trying to like learn this dude's personality just a little bit, or this girl's personality just a little bit. So like when I'm like reading this person's work, I can picture them talking to me. I want to have a conversation with the author a little bit. I think that's one of the things that I do as a dyslexic is I want to like picture us having like it's basically a one-way conversation, but I'd like to picture that person there with me reading it to me. The third thing I do is I go and skim some book talks, like book notes. You just Google the name of the book and then type notes or a summary or something, and then people love doing book summaries. So most books that you want to read, someone's already read it and took the best parts that they found and they put it on the internet for you. So that's what I do, and what that does, it creates like a model inside my head. It also creates like a picture of a person reading me this book, and it also kind of creates something I can anticipate. So like in chapter 1, I know I'm going to be learning about this. In chapter 2, I know I'm going to be reading about this. And what that makes me do is it makes me ask really good questions before I go into the reading. And then as I am listening to the audiobook, I'm able to kind of like answer those questions, and that keeps me engaged in the book. All right, the phase 2 of my workflow is actually just going and listening to this book. So I just download it off Audible and I throw on my AirPods and I just listen to the book. Now, while I'm listening, I usually speed up the audiobook depending on like what I'm interested in. So in Audible, you can speed it up to three times the speed. Normal speed is like when I'm like really trying to focus on something or something I'm not really understanding, or like a really interesting part of a book. I'll slow it down to like 1, and I'm like really trying to focus on that part. And if it's like something boring, or if it's something that I've already kind of know about, or if it's like a story or an example that I'm not really interested in, I just go to like ×3 and I just like speed through the parts that I'm not really interested in, like listening to at a slow level. The next thing that I do is on Audible there is a button called clip, and once you press that button, it's going to save the audio portion of that, like a 30-second audio portion of the section you're in into like a folder of your bookmarks. And we'll come back to that in the next part, but I save important or interesting clips into this bookmark type folder thing. The next thing I do often while I'm reading audiobook is I use the 30 seconds back button. If I miss something, or if there was something interesting I want to listen to again, you don't even need to turn on the Audible app. You can just, like on iPhone, it'll just show up the 30-second button. Once you just pull out your phone, it'll just show up and you can just tap that button without even unlocking your phone, and it'll just play the audio back 30 seconds, and it'll start from there. And I use this often. So the next part of my audiobook workflow is called post-reading. And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to take the best ideas from this book and put it into my second brain. And we'll talk about we'll talk more about building your second brain in future videos. But for right now, all you want to do is you want to put this into some kind of document where you can access it later. Because when you're reading an audiobook, it's a lot harder to go back and like skim and find pages that you really like. So the process that I use is on Audible, once you have things clipped, your highlights clipped, you can actually re-listen to them. So what I do is I take all those clips and I play them to a dictation app. So the dictation app that I use is the Google Dictation app. It's on Google Docs. All you got to do is go to Google Docs and turn it on, and then I play my clips from the audiobook into that Google Doc. And what that's going to do is it's going to transcribe the most important things that I saved as bookmarks onto that document. And the next part that I do is I take the table of contents and I pretty much fill in that table of contents with my highlights, and also the highlights that I found from the book summaries that I found on the internet. And then I have this like cool document with the best ideas from that book all saved in my second brain. And I'll show you guys how to insert book summaries into your second brain in a future video. That's pretty much it. So I'm gonna give you guys 3 tips and tricks that I think will really help you enjoy reading audiobooks. So the first thing is, if you can pick up some AirPods, it'll make your reading experience way better. The reason I love AirPods is you can pause your audio just by taking your AirPod out, and it'll stop the audio. What I do is I just put it right above my ear if I'm talking to someone, if I need to stop focusing on the book. And then once I put it back in my ear, the audio just starts again. It's amazing. It's like the coolest thing. The second thing is, sometimes I won't have my phone on me, I'll just tap Siri to tell it to change the volume, or I'll tell it to go back 30 seconds or 10 seconds or a minute. Just tap it and say, rewind 30 seconds, and it'll actually do that. Another thing that's really cool about having AirPods is that it removes all friction from you being able to listen to a book. So from thinking it to having the book play in your ear, it's pretty much instant. With Cours, you have to pull it out, connect it to your computer, connect it to your phone, and then unwind it, put it on your ears, and then you gotta fiddle with the wires and stuff like that. With this, you just gotta pop it in, and then it automatically plays the last thing that you were listening to. It's an awesome experience. So if you can get some AirPods, get it. It's gonna change your life. Another good tip is for you to practice listening faster. And this will naturally happen over time, but you can kind of push yourself to listen faster and faster with time. So in the beginning, when you first start reading audiobooks, you wanna listen at between 1 and 1.5 reading speed. And that'll give you a good enough comprehension to understand the words. But as you read more and more, you're able to push that listening speed to 2 or 3. And I've read over 250 books in the last 4 years, just through Audible. So now I have enough experience with listening that I'm able to push it to those higher listening speeds, especially if it's a boring part. So give yourself some practice so you're able to kind of push yourself and you're able to get through books a lot faster, especially if they're the boring parts. The last thing that I want to leave you guys off here with is that you want to build your reading affinity. You want to enjoy reading. So when you first started reading audiobooks, don't pick the hardest thing to read. What I would do is I would pick some stories, some really engaging stories. I love sci-fi, and if you go to the Audible recommended list, the top sci-fi books are really good. And any of the top stories that are recommended by a lot of listeners, I would just give them a chance. And the really good thing about Audible is that if you don't like it, you can return it. Just keep returning books until you find one that you really like, and then get through that book, and then read another one, and then read another one, and then read another one. And eventually it will become just a thing that you do. You'll just whenever you get bored or whenever you have other things going on, you'll just get this thing. You'll just put it in your ear, and they'll make your whole experience of doing those chores or driving or whatever a better experience. And then eventually you will start loving books. You will be addicted to reading. And that's kind of what happened to me. And a large portion of my entertainment budget right now is spent on Audible. I probably, I read a couple books a week. So that's what I want to leave you guys off with. I hope you enjoy it. Friends, the YouTube recommendation engine is an AI system. It's an algorithm that shows you videos that it thinks you like to watch. So if you'd like to learn how to leverage technology to become smarter, build your personal monopoly, and master your dyslexia, like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you do that, it'll teach the YouTube algorithm that you like videos like this one. And then YouTube will start showing you the rest of the series on your homepage. So if you don't want to miss out on this opportunity to master your dyslexic mind, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Love you.